Hello everybody, Pinstripe here. Welcome back to some more Hogs of War scrimmage. Tonight we are back at it again with Mr. Bog Rodan here on Aquabase. He is threatening our Grenadier, starting this first turn and asking, are you sure, Pin, that you want to kind of take on the situation? Live footage of enemy sapper threatening Grenadier with shrapnel live on camera. You'll never guess what happens next. But this footage is technically old now because it showcases what Aquabase used to be like as far as armament goes, because the most recent, I say recent, it's been quite a few months now since that patch came out, but basically the aqua tanks that are closest to the player, i.e. that you can walk to, those now only hold 100 HP's worth of armor, and then the two other aqua tanks that are furthest away that you have to commit a jetpack to, or swim if you're a madman, those hold more armor in the default 150. So in this gameplay, we'll be discussing the gameplay as we go along like we normally do, but I just want to kind of touch on the idea of armor. Things that we've partially discussed in the past relating to like medical tents and sort of getting used to these new things within competitive Hogs. I mean, by this point, by the time this video comes out, because I am doing this commentary in 2024, it is currently October, but as I finally do have a video schedule, I think this video itself will be coming out in January. Anyway, regardless of time, it has taken some getting used to having all these new elements in play, whether it be abilities of healing in that of medical tents, like I said, additional methods of hiding in that of shelters. As you can see, we have 3 here, and then being able to use higher quantities of vehicles that we didn't in the past. So if we take a look at Death Patch, for instance, back when that was P-Drag, we only had 2 of the tanks available. Of course, the tank HP is significantly lower across the board on that map, with all tanks only holding 80 HP, whereas we have more of a split here, which was more of a compromise in my mind, because originally this commentary was meant to focus on the gameplay with all these aqua tanks holding more armor, because I do much prefer that. But it's that argument that it takes too long. Like, gameplay is increased significantly when you introduce all of these elements that require you to deal more damage. And again, my focus as a game developer, my thinking at the time was that same focus with medical tents and healing, in that these things, these items on the map that you can drive or hide in or use, become the center focus of that map. So, you know, we again, talking about it before in previous videos, just how in competitive Hogs, or just casual Hogs in general, the primary goal 95% of the time is to kill all of your other opponent's pigs. Do that, you win. But then you introduce all these other elements where pigs can hide away and increase their armament as well. Suddenly those things become the center focus before you even get to the pig. And the natural byproduct of that, of course, is the gameplay lengthwise is then increased, and skill level takes a little bit of time to catch up to that as far as developing strategies in defense against these things, in using these things in attack. And when we look at the aqua tank especially, or just tanks in general in Hogs, movable vehicles can become movable bombs when they reach a certain level of HP. So the biggest problem that a lot of players have is falling into that trap of dealing not enough damage to destroy said vehicle and leaving it open for their opponent to drive it towards them, park it up next to them, and then damage that vehicle alongside the pig it's parked next to in order to deal extra damage, and you can see where the craziness arises. So the first very obvious piece of advice I could give when it comes to being defensive against aqua tanks is, if you are going in to destroy said vehicle, you need to ensure that you are going to do that within that turn. You cannot leave any kind of opportunity open for your opponent to do that and use that kind of plan against you, because obviously the forerunners for this kind of strat are going to be that of these sappers and the heavy weapons, because they bring the necessary firepower for some of these vehicles. Again, on Death Patch, it makes sense there because the vehicles only have 80 HP, but on here, the extra 50 on 2 of the aqua tanks aren't going to cut it for the heavy weapons and his flamethrower. Flamethrower, of course, only deals 102 HP's worth of damage in a single turn, so on the likes of pillboxes, tanks, and the weaker aqua tanks, those are going to be perfect, but for the stronger ones, you need to leave that for the much heavier hitting sappers and their shrapnels, because shrapnels can deal up to 200 HP's worth of damage, and beyond that as well, if you are able to get the pieces of shrapnel to connect where needed. Now, the other piece of advice I can give if you are going on the offensive, as you can see I am currently with my aqua tank, is to do things that will surprise your opponent. Like this position here is very unconventional, but I am confident enough with my shots to get this bazooka directly in the middle, so we distribute that damage. Unfortunately, it then creates the problem of creating 2 low health HP pigs, which is going to require me at some point to jump on some heads. And I mean, the number 16 is not great for poison, because even if you deal said poison, that just leaves a single head jump for your opponent to remove that potential skip. But you can see Revan here is about to attempt the shrapnel, and this is what I was saying about being unconventional with your positioning of the aqua tank. If you can make the shot as challenging as possible for your opponent, the better it's going to be for you, because as you can see in this shot, he only deals 30, which is perfect for me, or at least it would be if we were playing on the updated version of Aquabase. So moving forward, like I say, am very much aware that I need to take out the Grenadier, so it's going to be a very, very close turn using the maximum timeage of the full 30 seconds, getting those head jumps in, returning back to my vehicle, and then trying to get the shot away, which was very, very close to being successful. The overall theme in this video, I suppose, is that I am the one who is tank hopping. I'm going to be the one that's going to be holding the armament, and Revan is the one that is going to be defensive. That was not planned. I mean, it was just the choices that we made during this matchup. Revan didn't really go for the tanks. He's too cool for those, I guess. I'm sure he'll use them eventually in a league match. I'm sure he probably has by this point, given when this video will eventually be uploaded. Season 5 should be over by now. So GG to whoever won, by the way. I'm sure I got knocked out, or didn't even qualify for the playoffs. That is my prediction in the year 2024. Let's hope that that didn't happen going forward. Anyhow, the other piece of advice I can give when it comes to dealing with aqua tanks on this map is that of speed and distance. The aqua tank is incredibly slow. It is technically faster on land than it is on water, but you have the ability to maneuver yourself away from the tank to the other side of the Skull Island and even into the corners of the map where it is much tougher for your opponent to reach you. Again, these seem very obvious on paper, but when you're in the heat of battle and you're really trying to just move all these things, all these pieces together, it can be quite, you can get quite easily flustered, you know? So we have touched on it before when we look at ice flow, in that idea of gaining the high ground, keeping that distance, and putting the pressure on your opponent to deal the long shots. And then when we factor in that idea with vehicles, it becomes even tougher, because that's where, I mean, in the aqua tank, the bazooka is going to be the primary thing that you use. If you're going to be using a mortar, then you're just going to be using it for trolls, right? Let's be honest. But the bazooka, and indeed the angle and the angle play, I suppose, within the aqua tank is much more challenging to get your head around compared to just standing on a flat surface and shooting with a pig. Like here, for instance, I have a decent angle, but I don't use enough power, and I don't get the maximum amount of damage onto that sapper. Somehow I didn't damage myself. I guess the landscape kind of absorbed the main bit of the shell there. But that's the perfect example of just how inconsistent the angles can be, and kind of the knowledge and muscle memory that you need to use it effectively. Because again, you know, we are very skilled players. I don't want to toot my own horn, but after playing this game for 20 years, tanks are still a little bit iffy. Like, it takes me a while to get my bearings, to get my aim in place, and to get my Power Rangers in there as well. Not Power Rangers. I mean, the green one was always my favorite. The black one was great. No one likes the red one because he's just like the default dude, you know? Red aqua tanks, I guess there's some kind of linkage there, but anyway, let's get back to the gameplay. Here, I didn't even realize, I'm talking about the mortar. I didn't realize I had it equipped. I thought I had the bazooka equipped. Just shut up, Pin. Don't use mortars. They're just most pointless weapon in the world. I mean, at least in the aqua tank anyway. You'll notice as well that I am holding the pillbox, which is the secondary vehicle that you find here. While it is the weaker of the two, it does provide you with a strong defensive spot against enemy pigs, but your sight lines are much more hampered here, so you will be using its armor more like a shelter half the time, and if you are able to use one of those heavy machine guns, then more power to you. But you'll notice where this sapper is standing, I have no chance of hitting him with my current pillbox. And Revan, of course, then finally ends up taking down said aqua tank on 120 HP, completely destroyed in a single hit. And that is kind of my argument, or was my argument I should say, for maintaining the higher health pools of 150, because I enjoy having that balance across the board, you know, where we have certain maps where there is lower health pools of vehicles or buildings, and then other maps where it is stronger. Because yes, consistency is good, but when you take into consideration the landscape and the abilities of whatever vehicle it is that you have, or whatever the building is that you're holding, then you need to play to those strengths a bit more. Because again, when we factor in the idea of the aqua tank being able to go out onto the water, and if you're able to one-shot that tank consistently all the time, if these aqua tanks, for instance, held 80 HP, then the majority of players would never decide to go out onto the water and chill, because they would more than likely be way too scared to stay out there for fear of being destroyed by a sapper and their pig drowning because it's too big of a distance to come back safely, you know? So that was my basic understanding and thinking with having the 150s across the board, but compromise was put in place, and again, trying to incorporate some kind of relevant game design of the ones that are closer to you are weaker, the ones that are further away that require commitment are stronger, but in my case, you know, my paratrooper tried to commit and failed where he really needed to use his jetpack skills, and fair play to Revan, because this mortar is just right on the money, right on the crate. I'm pretty sure there was a crate there, and killing me in a single hit. So yeah, GG to him. Beautiful shot. Play of the game, as they would say in Overwatch. Remember those days? Oh, first person shooters. Goddamn, I haven't played one of those in a long time. Do I miss Overwatch? The characters, yes. The gameplay, not so much. So just going back to that example of being too scared to maneuver outwards, you can see how that is just one example of how low HP can affect gameplay. High HP is obvious because, as we've touched on, time, Dr. Freeman. It takes too much time to kill a pig, but I do think that the poison gas is quite effective. I'll stop now. Yes, so it's going to take you more time to take out said vehicle, but doing that impression has kind of messed up my thought process. Hang on. The overarching theme here is that of strategy, and whenever we introduce new elements to that strategy, it becomes much more complex for the person that is defending. I think if we look at Hogs as a whole, if you are the person that, say, doesn't get the first turn, that doesn't acquire X, Y, and Z, whether it be a vehicle or a crate or a weapon of some sort, you know, that's when you are on the back foot, and that is the most challenging part of this game, is if you lose those things, still being able to maintain a foothold in the game. You know, that for me I find is the most challenging, because when you are the person attacking, there are things that come into play that are challenging, but in my opinion, being defensive is a much, much tougher job. And if you can do that effectively, if you can keep your distance while dealing damage, if you can put the pressure onto the guy that is attacking you in the tank, then you make that player run the risk of doing a mistake, of not dealing the damage, and then that immediately will open the door for you to step in and either take out the tank in one or keep it at a relatively high enough value that within the next turn or two you can then take it down. Because you can see here, this aqua tank is on 62, which I deem to be not high enough to continue within. I could have kept it around, but I knew that Revan did have weapon capabilities that could take it down within that turn. So you need to use your judgment as when is the right time to retreat in a tank as well, because you don't want to be lingering around when the tank damage can be dealt against you. Don't forget, you will be taking 40 HP's worth of damage if that vehicle is destroyed with your pig inside it. So keep that in mind, and of course do remember to collect resources where possible, because Aquabase, compared to the likes of Skullduggery, actually contains stuff. Aqua tanks, of course, were the big thing, but for those wondering about how this was actually put together, for those of you that either haven't played competitive before or haven't checked out the new multiplayer maps that we have for both competitive and casual play, almost getting the perfect shot there, by the way. This is an unused map, which is why it contains these pieces. The map itself, like the physical terrain that you can see, is near enough exactly the same as Skullduggery, but it was kind of put to the side with all of these pieces in it and left to rot in the files of Hogs. So I did a little bit of a switcheroo, and in doing so, through ripping the game apart and kind of taping it back together again with glue and sticky tape, that's also the reason why in ISO 3 the music isn't there, because in the process of putting it back together again, that was the negative byproduct of doing that. There is no music to be heard, so I do apologize. As for right now in this gameplay, it is technically a 4v1, but as the sapper falls, that draws it down to a 3, bearing in mind that the scout is still alive and pretty damn healthy, and as I am a grenadier, I am still pretty powerful. I do still hold the necessary equipment to spin this game around, but I am very much outnumbered. So when it comes to the aqua tank, even though the one that I've got currently is somewhat healthy, the enemy heavy on Revan's team is going to have something to say about that. So to clue you in, I guess, on what my thinking is during this time, even though the scout is going to hide in the shelter, Revan can do that. That's not a problem by any stretch of the imagination in my mind, because my focus is purely on getting to the other side of the map to acquire the other aqua tank. If you've been paying attention, I have been effectively island hopping and making use of all the other aqua tanks available. Bearing in mind that Revan does still have a paratrooper who is alive, who has been alive for much longer than he should have been. He should have been dead many, many a turn ago, and I only just managed to deal the necessary damage in order to finally take him out, because I think I missed like at least 2 shots in trying to take him down previously. So para is finally done, and it is now a 2v1 situation. But Mr. Flamethrower is going to come along and wreak havoc on my aqua tank for a little bit. It's not going to be too devastating, but these are the kind of situations that I enjoy most, because they are completely out of both of our comfort zones. These are things that we haven't had to deal with or think about in a competitive situation. This is all completely new territory, so the way in which you use a tank, the way in which you use this vehicle, the way in which you position yourself, whether you be on the water's edge or near to where your next turn is going to take you. In this case, you can see I'm trying to make it to the other side, but I'm aware that I do not have enough time to make it. So I will try and back myself up as much as I possibly can before then firing off the shot, because then it will make it easier for me on the next turn to make it over there and switch up my vehicle. And bearing in mind as well that my health pool is on 66, Revan has no method of destroying me from this position with a scout. He does have a rocket launcher, but even that is not enough to take me down in a single hit. So I am comfortable in my current position, and to I guess, prepare for what is coming, Revan decides to instead target the Aqua Tank that I am going for, so it's not sitting at full HP. So I do initially think about maybe moving inside and taking the tank towards the gunner. My controller is still pretty weird. That was just a random misinput that occurs. My controller will randomly hit the triangle button without me pressing it at all, which is why in some of the gameplay that you have probably seen in past videos, that has occurred in competitive matches. And again, seeing as Revan didn't target my Aqua Tank, I'm still sitting on 66 HP, so I can still tank another hit, so I don't need to maneuver to the other Aqua Tank just yet. Obviously, the main benefit of the Aqua Tank is being able to take it out onto the water and sit comfortably away from your opponent and generally become a much tougher shot to hit if you are up against an opponent who isn't so confident with their low angles, either with the bouncing of grenades or shells, or just generally aren't so accurate with those kinds of power weapons. In the case of Revan, he enjoys his high angles, he gets a good defensive position, but no damage onto my Aqua Tank. Not that it really mattered for him, because again, the outcome was already in motion, I suppose, because I was going to maneuver myself over here originally. Anyway, it was meant to be my paratrooper that made it to this Aqua Tank, because I was meant to distribute my pigs evenly across the board and acquire all the vehicles possible, but he ended up crash landing and then eventually dying from that awesome mortar shot from Revan earlier on in this game. But you can see I'm also slightly slowly as well getting my bearings with my my power ranges. These are all very much learning experiences, shall we say, with the Aqua Tank. I like to think that I am fairly confident with my vehicle shots in the ranges of both the tank and Aqua Tank. I do, of course, enjoy the airburst of the tank variety, because whenever that hits like dead on and then the additional shell splashes come in, it's so satisfying. But sadly, no airbursts here. We are limited to just the bazooka, but now down to 70 HP. I have got my ranges in. I know the power required. It is basically full, and we'll take that 39 on the Scooty Booty Man. So now, seeing as Abraham is on 78, he is going to now provide me with the best opportunity to kill him in one. Again, don't forget, I am a Grenadier inside the Aqua Tank here, and this is where you could argue that it is perhaps a wee bit unfair for the player that is attacking me, because he has provided me with a bomb here. I can then drive it straight up to him, park it as I mentioned previously, and then deal the necessary damage to take him out in one. So it's these kinds of strategies that players need to learn how to counter the Aqua Tank, because when you drop it down to a certain HP and you are in range of that Aqua Tank, you automatically become a target to the driver of that vehicle. If you're not too sure on how to counter the Aqua Tank, then I will be making a future video that will go into details about that. But in terms of this video, I would recommend by starting Aquabase by acquiring an Aqua Tank for yourself, and then if you end up out of the tank and having to face it one-on-one, then the idea of distance and taking a more defensive approach is perhaps your best bet, because the further away that you can remain from that tank, the longer it has to drive to you. Keeping in mind those 30 seconds, it's going to be tougher for your opponent to get to you. And again, taking the defensive mindset of hunkering down and hitting those long shots. Of course, it is much tougher for the classes that aren't of the heavier variety, so the ones that only really have the long range grenade launcher. But in this case, it comes down to the wire, and I only just manage to take down the scout with my 11 HP Grenadier. So we come away with the win, lots to learn from, lots to think about going forward. Hope you guys enjoyed, as that wraps it up for this video. Let me know your thoughts on everything in the comments below, and I'll catch you guys later for the next one.
Right, you putrid porker. You should be proud of your hogs. I've given you, 5 additional promotion points to decorate them with. Are you listening to a word I say? Repeat after me. Minefields are very bad things to wander into. Now, press your button and we will be the richest nation in the world. Just imagine, limitless swill supplies until the end of all time. Oh, God, don't mess it up.